Hey everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. It is 10 a.m. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully the weather's gotten a little bit better wherever you are. Seems to have stopped snowing and sleeting here, so always glad of that. This morning we are having a presentation on driving training for people with disabilities, and Susan Fassett is our presenter. She's with South Bend Memorial Hospital, and she's in the occupational therapy area. And she's going to be discussing the process and how that all works. And one of her coworkers who does the intake piece is going to be stepping in as well to kind of help. Please hold your questions till the end, and we will get them answered. And Susan, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to you if you're ready.
I am ready. I hope I can pull up the PowerPoint. We shall see. Show my screen.
And there you go.
All right. Oop, I guess I started at the bottom. Let me get back up to the top here. I don't know how to take the other portions off, so if it's okay, I'll leave it like that.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. All righty. Am I good?
Yep.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is something new for me, doing a webinar, so I hope it goes well for you. But as Amy mentioned, I am with Memorial in South Bend. We also service all kinds of other counties. We go from the northern third of the state, basically, like US 30 North. We go across the whole state line to state line. We've been doing this for quite a while, so we know the areas and the different places that you folks are located. And talk about the services that we offer through our program. The main thing that we do when we start with everyone is a driver evaluation, and I will get into that in just a little bit. Another service we provide is the driver rehabilitation for those folks who have driven, or new drivers, which would be the training portion of it. We do the behind the wheel part of that only. And we're not really set up for a classroom, although we do some tutoring programs. We do see folks that need equipment, so we do what's called a VME, which is a vehicle modification evaluation. And along with that, then we will do the functional after check of that to be sure that the equipment is installed where the people need to have it, and if there's any adjustments that have to be made. We work with the service provider, the vendor that does put that equipment in. The people that we serve is anyone with a documented disability. They can be referred by physicians, optometrists, ophthalmologists, psychiatrists. We have voc rehab clients, and we also get referrals from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. If there are folks that are having difficulty getting their licenses or fail a test, we will get that type of referral as well, because they don't know what to do with them once they don't pass and there seems to be some medical condition present. I have Natasha with me here, and she's going to explain what the physician's note needs to say if you do make a referral, and how to make that referral.
Okay, so we can accept a referral from any medical doctor, and for insurance to pay for this, there needs to be a medical diagnosis. So with the ICD-10 codes, there's a lot of ICD-10 codes that, if you're familiar with them, that they've made up, like if someone even has a pet, they have an ICD-10 code for that. So it really needs to be a medical-based diagnosis. Ones that I frequently see are dementia, Alzheimer's, brain injury, spinal cord injury, anything like that that could be related to driving. You can always fax those to us with my attention, and I usually contact the patient in 1 to 2 days. And if I provide my email address, it can also be emailed as well. We ask that you also include their date of birth, a doctor's signature, and insurance information. We see that insurance companies have been paying for this service because we're using a billable diagnosis code, and they're finding it medically necessary since we have occupational therapists that are doing the evaluations.
Okay. When Natasha does schedule, she does let them know that they will be here for a couple of hours. It all depends on how how they perform on the test. Some tests take longer for others. Some go really quickly. Some, we don't even take on the road if they do have a lot of cognitive and visual problems. When someone does get processed and they are in for the evaluation, these are the steps that we take during that evaluation. We do an intake interview, and that includes any kind of driving they've had, any kind of pre-driving as far as even riding a bike or any other movement experiences that would have. They also need to be able to pass a vision screening, and in Indiana, they have to have a minimum 20/50 with correction, 20/40 without correction for acuity. The BMV does not test for peripheral vision, but we do that as well to be sure that they have the peripheral vision needed for driving. We do some perceptual screenings, cognitive screenings, reaction time, which is the physical reaction time of the gas to the brake, visual reaction time, which is Dynavision, which is a large light board for scanning and reaction time purposes, and then the behind the wheel skills. And we'll go into each of those sections now. Some of our folks come with driving history, some do not. I think some of your population may not have any driving history. They may have poor driving history. We need to know that their medical history is stable. If there's any seizures involved, they would not be eligible for driving. If they are controlled, there is a form from the BMV. It's a pink form that the client would have to have filled out by their doctor. And then every time, I believe it's every year, every 2 years, depending on how often they have seizures, they have to provide that information. We look at what people's goals are for driving. What do they have to do? Some of us drive just to and from work, and that's sufficient. Some of us, like myself, and I'm sure you, have to drive to different clients' homes. So there's a higher need for your goal for driving than there would be for someone who's just driving 2 or 3 days a week. There could be family concerns. They're going to know the person, from day one, and so they may have more concerns based on how they function in other day-to-day activities. We can also look at different forms of adaptive equipment if that is needed to help them become a driver. When we do our visual screening, then it is similar to the BMV screening. We use what's called an Optec 5000 that looks at acuity, it looks at color, it looks at depth perception. We can look at lateral and vertical phorias, which is how the eyes are aligned. We look at peripheral screening, and some of the common problems that we would see in something like this is if someone were to have one eye that they suppress, if they're having trouble with peripheral and didn't know it, if they haven't been to the eye doctor in a long time. A lot of our folks haven't been to the eye doctor, since high school, maybe they're in their mid-20s. And although they may not have any vision problems, it's a good idea to have that screened periodically. Then we go into perceptual screening and cognitive, but perceptual, we look at the motor free visual perception test, the basic one, or the MVPT-3, and that looks at different forms of perception. It looks at visual memory, looks at spatial orientation, looks at visual closure, looks at figure ground, which is picking things out of a background. Certain times of the year it's harder to see those signs, especially with the fall weather we just had with all the leaves blocking some of those signs. We look at trail making tests, and in that it's a scanning and also a divided attention task. There are 2 parts to that. So one is simple, one is more complex. We look at clock drawing as far as spatial orientation, look at some mapping skills. Are they able to, do they know their directions? Are they able to find, their way from, point A to point B, places they go all the time? And what I see a lot when I'm driving with them is they may be able to do the skills, but then you add that extra portion of planning your route as well, and that can be a little more challenging for some of our drivers. We would ask some basic road sign recognition, the 7 basic road sign shapes. We have them in our iMachine as well, and they are color coded in the iMachine. We always know we're in trouble when we have someone that can't identify a stop sign, but most of them can get that. We have a word recall. We have safety questions, basic safety questions, as in, do they know to call 911? How would they get emergency people to them if they needed it? On reaction time, we do a simple brake reaction time test, and that has a unit where you have an accelerator and a brake pedal. We have to know that they have the red and green color discrimination, and we do that earlier in the eye screening, where they can go from the accelerator to the brake and see how quickly they do that. That is simply, can they follow the 2-step direction, and can they move that foot to the brake? The Dynavision activity I alluded to earlier, that is a large, like a 4x4 foot light board, and they can actually scan on that one. They don't have to look straight ahead. They can scan on that one, and they turn their head and they use both hands and hit out as many lights in a minute as possible. There's a second portion to that, again with a divided attention capacity, where they do the lights, and then there's a 2-digit number that will show up. And then they have to do the number as well as use the lights while they're doing this over a 1-minute time frame. If they are able to, we then take them behind the wheel. However, if their scores inside are so poor, we may reserve the right not to take them out. We look at some basic driving skills. We want to be sure, can they start and stop the car? Can they make basic right and left turns? Do they know where the stuff is located? Turn signals are always on that left side, and some folks have some issues with that. When we take our folks out on the car, we don't have any identifier on the vehicle that we're driver education, driver rehab, because we want to blend with the other traffic. We don't want people to see us and try to get out of the way. If there is an equipment need, we do demonstrate that equipment. We try different equipment as needed. We let them start off street in a big parking lot so they can get used to the equipment before putting them out on the road with other roadway users. Because, let's face it, if you've not used equipment and you go out there, you may not understand how the equipment works, and then you have to deal with the other traffic that's out there. Some of our more common equipment that we use, left foot accelerator pedal if someone doesn't have function of the right side, right foot particularly. We use hand controls. We have the option to do hand controls on the left or the right. Primarily they're used on the left unless there's some issues with a shoulder, mainly because of how our cars are configured, where you have to shift the car, you have to hold the brake with the left hand. But there are options for the right side as well. And then different steering devices. If someone has problems with their hands, we can do different devices such as a spinner knob, tri-pin. There's all different ways for someone to handle the wheel if they don't have good hand function. We also have access to a van. They have fully automatic lifts and doors. There's a lot of configuration that can be done in the van, right side, left side. A person can drive from their wheelchair, or they can drive from a transfer seat. There are also many alternative ways of starting and shifting, a lot of push button starts, a lot of remote steering wheels, a lot of secondary controls that can be mounted in a number of different places. It can be accessed with the elbow, with the head. So there's a lot of different alternatives, with that. Another group we work with is the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. When we have folks that need to have all of their time with us, if they don't have any option to drive with other family members, we can escort them to the license branch to take the test. That will depend on how much they can drive with other people, if they need equipment and stuff like that. And as I said before, some of our referrals do come from failed road tests at the BMV, so they are another resource that can be sent to us at different times. There are times that we have to say no to our drivers. we've been getting, I think, a fair amount of folks with dementia lately. If while they're driving, they have problems with emotional control. If they can't keep a lane position, despite some of the instruction that they've received. If they've not driven, we don't just expect them to know all this stuff, but we do want to give them some opportunity to learn it. Disregard of traffic laws. I mean, if they're just, not stopping at stop signs. And I added today an attempted trial program with specific goals. I think a lot of your clients are those that maybe have not driven. And so we want to give them the opportunity to have some goals established to see if they can follow through and can, first of all, get their permits, but then also to do some of the basic tasks of driving. Then if they can do that, then we can move on to that next step of the more complex things with, route planning and lane changes and those kind of activities that are part of driving. Okay. It's kind of hard though sometimes if you do give them a trial program and they think that, they're hoping to be able to do this, but they can't, then they realize there is kind of a loss of independence. Sometimes there's family conflicts. Some people will drive anyway. We have found that to be true. And there's not a lot of resources to provide transportation, public transportation. Now there is more, I think, available. I know some of our clients have used Uber when they haven't passed their drive test yet, so they can use Uber for some of those short distances if they're able to access that. It depends on the community that you're in as far as how much is available. In South Bend, we have Transpo Access, but I believe they have to call 2 weeks ahead to get those rides scheduled. So, that again becomes challenging for folks. And I don't know how much transportation is being provided in other areas, but I know just from South Bend and from Fort Wayne, I go over there, there's not a lot of extra support for public transportation. We do have some success stories. Not everyone is a poor driver. Some people just have some poor habits that need to be adjusted. Some people can return to like limited driving as far as getting to and from work or to and from those basic tasks, daytime driving, things like that. We have such a wide variety of disabilities that we serve that it's hard to tell. Some have minimal ones that can do just a little bit of adjustment to their driving styles or time of day that they drive. Some need, a lot more training. Depending on a diagnosis, sometimes people need to be retested periodically, and that we usually defer more to a physician related diagnosis. And sometimes people come to us too soon if, say, they've had a traumatic brain injury and they try to get into the driving too quickly. They find that they get frustrated and need to do more of the general OT, speech and PT in order to get a better outcome. So sometimes if people come too quickly, we like to have them come back later once they've received more outpatient treatment. When we see our new drivers are, actually any driver, the potential outcome from the evaluation is that the client just should not drive. They don't have the skills at the time that we see them, that we feel they are safe to drive, and we will make that recommendation to them and to the family. We may attempt a trial program with very specific goals, and with the new drivers, sometimes it's just holding a straight line at 30 and 40 miles an hour. Sometimes it's making basic turns, and then they can continue to work towards that independent driving. So that is the PowerPoint that I have. I know you probably have questions, and I can refer back to any of the slides if you want to let me know that. There. Are your populations generally the ones that are going to be the newer drivers? And if so, we also work a lot with vocational rehabilitation for anyone that would be a potential employee for competitive employment. Are the questions going to show up in that little box on the right, Amy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they're supposed to hear it or if it's going to be typed in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened. Somehow or another, I lost all my audio. I was freaking out there for a second, so I apologize.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Woo. Okay, so
Yeah.
yes, we do have some questions. It's a Friday.
It
So
sure is, and we've had snow.
what is the cost typically to the consumer, or is there special funding for this?
Well, usually, like I said, usually we go through the voc rehab as our probably our number one referral, and then they authorize. So there would be no cost to the consumer. We do base it though, if they come through on Medicare and other insurances, it is the general OT charge.
Which is about $380 an hour, and it's usually a 2-hour evaluation about. But that doesn't include the Medicare or insurance contractual discount. So when we're talking Medicare, we're talking much less than, the $380 an hour. I'm not quite sure what our contractual rate is with Medicare, but for instance, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, we would take 33% off of that. I know what their contractual rate is.
Okay. Are there other locations that do similar service such as Fort Wayne? I know Parkview does.
Yes, and there are some private companies. And sometimes the private ones are just like a self-pay, and so it's a little maybe less, just for a one-time for an evaluation. I don't know how they do with the follow-up training if that's required.
Okay. If you have a student that has graduated from high school and had an IEP and cannot pass the written driving test, do you work with those individuals?
Yes, we do. We actually have had several here recently that have come through, and we do a one-to-one. That is, I guess, the closest to a classroom program that we would get. But we do one-on-one and work with them to tutor them to be able to help them pass the written test. They still have to pass that. They still have to hold their permit, certain time and all that. But we can help them with that aspect of it.
Okay.
And we've been pretty successful with that.
And is there a specific ICD-9 code that would work with the physician to address that particular need? Or is that just part of the overall?
Yeah, one that I've seen come through is like learning disability or anything along those lines, whatever they're struggling with has been accepted and paid for.
And that leads me to another question. What about like diagnoses for autism spectrum disorder? Does that typically get approval for driver's evaluation?
Yep, I see that one often, and that one does get approved as well.
Okay. So what age do you typically start working with an individual? We have an individual who's approaching legal driving age and whose father is interested in this service.
Okay. We can start at legal driving age. However, generally 18, I think, is when like Voc Rehab would step in. I know I refer back to them, but we know that they would help the folks for sure. That is a definite. And if they're 16, they can work towards it. Sometimes they're not ready at 16. And so that's why generally we wait till they're closer to 18, but they certainly can start at legal driving age. We've had them from that age all up into their 90s. So we do have the whole young adult to older adult spectrum.
And then in terms of with Voc Rehab, because I know they've gone to order of selection.
Yes.
How is that impacting? So that let's say we do have a student who has an IEP, maybe they're on that autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. They're a fairly high functioning young adult. Really do need to see driver's training because maybe we're seeing some issues with attention, focus. When they go to Voc Rehab, how does that impact them? Because I know order of selection, they're going to get bumped way, 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 way down the line. So how does that work?
Right. I believe that they have to have difficulty with 3 of 5 activities of daily living is, I believe, what the standard is. I was just at a meeting a couple of weeks ago and they were talking about that. And it depends. If there's folks that aren't using the money that have more impairments, then that money, will be there. I know they have, I have written stuff for vehicles and that's been turned down, or they don't get exactly, everything. So they are scaling back. But I think if they're having such difficulty with 3 of the 5 ADLs is where they're looking at that and how is it impacting. It has to be a significant thing. If they have been in the system before, they're somewhat grandfathered in. I had a client tell me that last week that, if they're in, then they're going to get the services that they need to, either school or employment, whichever it happens to be.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anything else you guys want to know? Give everybody a minute or two to see if they're furiously trying to type something in or.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and again, it's like this is different for us, so it's kind of fun to watch this unfold.
We had somebody note great information. Yes, it definitely was. I think that was really helpful for all of us. Is there contact information other than the phone number for Natasha? I guess looking maybe for other areas, or do you just contact I know, like we said, Parkview. I think that's about the only other one in this northeastern Indiana area, isn't it? Is you guys in Parkview that do the driver eval hospital-wise?
Right, and I actually cover over there too. I do their behind the wheels over at Parkview, but there is a therapeutic mobility services. If you get on we have an association called ADED, ADED, and you can get on that, and it will list, by state who is a certified driver rehab specialist. That's a CDRS. Who's OT, who's rec therapy. It will list everyone, and then you have a better idea on where folks are located.
Okay, and that was ADED?
ADED.net, I think, is what you can look up, and it will list everyone.
Awesome.
Because that's a good resource. Do you folks get a lot of people that have physical disabilities?
Yes, we get the gamut as well. Everyone who comes through our doors has to meet Social Security level of disability and also state of Indiana. So they have to meet the same criteria, the 3 of the 5 that Voc Rehab. So it's pretty much the same. And then 4 of 5. So they have to basically meet the same criteria to be on waiver as they do in Voc Rehab. So we work with individuals. Everyone we work with will have some sort of developmental disability.
Okay.
So that could be, somebody with spina bifida who uses a wheelchair. That could be somebody who is, has maybe a borderline intellectual disability to somebody more severe, and everything in between. So yeah, we work with a pretty broad range, and we work with individuals who are pretty young, just
Right.
like you guys, like for us, though, it can go all the way down to like, I think we have some 2-year-olds in services right now. And then, we have
early
people,
for us.
yeah, we won't send them for driver evals.
Yeah.
And then, we have folks that are like in their 80s. So we cover a pretty broad spectrum of individuals as well.
Maybe you can help us out with a Medicaid waiver. What, how are they, because we've seen that come through for vehicle modifications. Is there a limit to the monetary amount that they receive? How does that work?
Yes, there is. For individuals who are on what's called the Family Support Waiver or the FSW, they have a lifetime limit of $7,500 that can be used for vehicle modifications. Okay. And then there are individuals who are on what is called the Community Integration Habilitation Waiver. Those individuals have a $15,000 lifetime limit that can be used towards vehicle mods. So if somebody's on that family support waiver, and they go ahead and they use their vehicle mod, and they use up their $7,500, and then later on they get onto the Community Integration Habilitation Waiver, which you have to meet emergency criteria to qualify. We won't go into all that. But down the line, but then they only have that $7,500 that they've already spent comes off that $15,000 that they get as a CIH waiver. So then they only still have $7,500, and it is a one and done. They're not going to that money, it's when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
And then
I could tell you that doesn't buy very much. If you're looking at a van, it doesn't buy.
It won't pay. Well, in for waiver, it does not pay for the van at all. Waiver does not pay for van. It will only pay for the modification to the van.
Right. And the vans themselves, if you have someone that needs a van to have it a lowered floor or any kind of lockdown, it has to be a newer vehicle. It cannot be anything that's old, which is a lot of what people can afford. It has to be, generally, for them to lower the floor, it has to be like 3 years and 36,000 miles. Plus, you've got to have the insurance for it, because that's an additional charge to that van. So if you say take a $20,000 van and put $15,000 of equipment, you've got to insure that for $35,000. And I know they've been having us do that with our Voc Rehab clients, because even though they're working, they may not be working at a high job that can help support that. You can get the van, you get the equipment, but then you have to be able to understand the insurance part of it, that it has to be covered, because you could lose more. So that is this stuff is there's so many wonderful things out there, but it's kind of cost prohibitive to a number of our folks.
It really is. It's definitely an issue that we come up against quite a bit. I did have somebody ask if we could get a copy of your slides.
I don't know how to do that. If you can tell me.
You can just email me your PowerPoint.
Okay.
And then I can send it out to everybody who attended, and that way they've got it.
Sure.
Because this is definitely information that I know we hear it, and it's wonderful information, and then it might be 6 months before somebody asks about it. And so this way, then the case managers can go back and say, oh, wait, we had somebody do a great presentation. Let me get that information for you.
Right.
So if you can, that'd be great.
I can give you my direct extension at my desk. However, this is an unusual day that I'm actually in the office. I'm usually out on the road, but I certainly get to voicemails eventually. Probably email is the easiest, because I can access that. I can access it anywhere. And you can certainly pass that out. You've got my email.
Yep.
You can.
I will do that.
That's often a good way to get that information, because then I can track it. I can say, okay, I responded to you, and it's just easier that way.
Absolutely. Totally understand. Do we have any other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you work with folks with low vision?
Yes, we do.
Okay, because we do service low vision drivers, and get into that on the PowerPoint, but anyone who Indiana recognizes low vision in driving, and they use bioptic driving. That again, though, if they're not of working age, they're not going to get a whole lot of funding for that.
Right.
And they've taken away the homemaker vocation from vocational rehabilitation.
Okay. Well, we haven't had any other questions come in, and I don't want to take up any more of your day.
Okay.
Again, we really so appreciate you coming on and talking and sharing this information. I think it was really helpful for everyone.
Okay.
And very much appreciated. So thank you very much.
All right.
And
Thank
you have
you.
a wonderful Friday.
Thanks. You
Happy
too.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So for everybody else, I'm looking at the list right now, and we will go ahead and move over to our other webinar. So thank you very much. I'll talk to you in a couple minutes.
Okay. It's kind of weird, isn't it?